Hello Assassins, Gargudon here, and welcome to episode 25 of the Memory Corridor. Joining me on the show today is Arshak, also known as AC Landmarks, and on his suggestion, we are going to be exploring history portrayed in Assassin's Creed as opposed to real-life history, as well as diving a bit into potential future historical settings for the franchise. But first and foremost, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your work here in the community.
Hi, Assassins. My name is Arshak, as Gargudon said, and what my community is, it is basically just filled with history and love for the Assassin's Creed franchise, and it's like a positive community. And what AC Landmarks does is we bring you digestible insights about historical topics in Assassin's Creed, whether it be landmarks, figures, or events that happen in Assassin's Creed. They were done sometimes accurately, sometimes fictionally, so I get to tell you about those.
It is.
So, yeah.
It's going to be real interesting, and as like I said, this topic was his idea, and he's certainly the right man for it. So, without further ado, let's just hop right into this. So, first and foremost, let's, like you mentioned, let's talk a bit about history in the games compared to real-life history. And the best way to say this is where to start, because there's so much to dive into.
Yeah, I mean, the history of Assassin's Creed, the real-life history, it's so abundant. I mean, you can start from like anywhere really, but I mean, it's best to start from like, you know, the Assassins and the Templars, like the first game.
Yeah.
Just set the stage
for everything,
for
and
like everything.
And the cool thing about that is that both like factions are loosely based on, you know, real life factions that were around there in the early millennium, like those centuries.
Yeah, and Assassin's Creed recently did like a very good thing with the YouTube channel History Hit, where they went and talked about Assassins versus Templars, and I think it was like 5 episodes of like getting historical information on their existence and like you know who the Assassins were, what their motivations were like, and then on the other flip side of the coin, you have the Templars, which I mean, they had their own motivations, and I mean, they came across each other, but it's a really great podcast. It's called Echoes of History for people that want to see it. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. You say that because, like I said, you know, both were real life factions there in like the 11th, 12th century, and then from how I understand it, it was there during the Third Crusade in the Holy Land that both of them kind of clashed in real life, and you know, that's essentially what inspired the game.
I especially like the portrayal of like Rashid ad-Din Sinan, who is Al-Mualim,
the mentor,
or if you want to say it in Arabic, Al-Muallim kind of thing, which is like it's really cool. I mean, he is a historical figure that actually was in the Assassin Order. So to have him...
The Hashashins, they were called in real life, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Hashashins.
Which means like protector or something in Arabic.
I don't know. I mean, I think they called them Hashashins because they thought they were like on another plane of existence, because like, you know, it's just like it's basically like they had hashish or something like that.
Yeah.
But like, really, I mean, they're the Nizari state thing. Hassan-i-Sabah had his own political agenda. I mean, Hassan-i-Sabah is not shown in the Crusades, of course, because he was like a little bit before then, but he served his own political agenda by having these assassins that believed in the Nazari state to go and get the job done, basically. Yeah. But
makes sense.
But the ability of Ubisoft to get this group and pit them against the Templars and just like have something going on between them. It started off years of Assassin's Creed games that just kept on going and going and going, and I mean, let it go as far and wide. We are always interested in AC lore and how it ties to real time history,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's so fascinating, and now that we kind of covered the real life assassins, I thought we could also dive into the real life Templars for a minute. And the thing is that for what we know about the real life Templar order, the games actually portray all of that quite accurately, especially the supposed extinction of the Templars when Grandmaster Jack de Molay is captured and burned at the stake some years later. In game, that is when the Templar order as we knew it is born. They merely went underground, and for all we know, they might have in real life too. But from what we know with real life history, that's when the Templar order went extinct, lost all their power and influence that they had, at least in the eyes of the public, whatever that meant back then. And it's actually funny, I actually last year I saw this I never buy that stuff, but I went by this history magazine at the supermarket, and the front page was the real life Templar order and such. And I thought, that looks interesting, I'm going to buy that. So that's kind of served as some, a little bit of chill light reading whenever I fancied. And the thing is, that really dives into all that, as I said, what I already know about the Templars' extinction and, their role in the Third Crusade and all that. The funny thing about it is, let's say there are some things the games left out, because these Templar Knights were, from what I know, they were essentially religious warriors in a way. So, they live in these monasteries and whatnot, with a very tight schedule, from this to that we'd pray, from this to that we'd eat and all that. And one of the things when the papal state then punished the Templars for everything they had done there in the early 1300s, was among other things, multiple homosexual encounters with each other. The games left that out. Apparently they had mass orgies at those those monasteries. Which makes sense, I suppose. I mean, when you have sworn to celibacy and you're holed up like that, 20, 30 dudes together, I suppose it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah, the games left that out, didn't it?
We gotta let the tensions out somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, the games left that out, I'm afraid, but yeah, it was quite interesting, and apparently every Grand Master in real life, all the recorded Grand Masters, they each had their own unique shield and emblem, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Everybody from who was Grand Master there. What was that?
Do you know if they kind of exist today, or I'm pretty sure there's just what do you call them? Sects that people create for the Templar order or something like that, based on their own beliefs or something like that. I don't know if they exist today. I know they exist lore wise, but historically, that's actually a really good thing to research if any Templars exist today.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of what I said, that in the games, the Templar order was supposedly wiped out there in 1314, but no, they merely went underground. And, for all we know, they might have done that in real life too. And there are, some historians have made that theory that like they may have just went underground then and may have gone on to other ventures. Like if that is still widespread today, that's hard to say, but at least then, they may have gone underground and done shenanigans for another 100, 200 years or something.
Yeah, there could be like a secret society somewhere that are just like Templars, and like the one of the rules is like you don't tell anyone about that we exist.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Oh my God.
But
that,
yeah,
that
I
would
mean
be funny.
that is, I suppose, like a good starting point for this whole thing. Was kind of covering the real life inspirations for both main factions of the AC franchise.
You were talking about Jacques de Molay.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best accuracies that.
Of course, the game made the custom interpretation that he was also, a sage, which I'm pretty sure he wasn't in real life.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
like, it's like him having to be burned in front of like King Philip, and then you get the flash forward to like French Revolution.
Yeah.
And
that whole prologue kind of served as really just the explanation for the Sword of Eden being hidden, and then the Templars ulterior motive for igniting the French Revolution was to get back at the French monarchy for putting the Templar order in its current state almost 500 years ago.
Since we're in the topic of like monarchy right now,
yeah,
I want to like fast forward a bit
sure.
into actually a sultanate, like Assassin's Creed Revelations.
Oh yeah, like the whole it was like the Ottomans and the Byzantines, isn't that what like I suppose the empires were called?
Yeah, basically. It's really cool because like recently, because of the Assassin's Creed community release that we did, I got to like research more about Turkey, and then I found out that like whatever happened in Turkey, which was called the Ottoman Empire back then, or Istanbul, between like the civil strife that happened between brothers, that was like all accurate. And the way Darby wrote that into a game, that they have like a civil strife, put Ezio in there too, was so cool, because like the character of Shakulu also existed, and he was causing troubles elsewhere for the brothers. It's not as accurate as him being with Manuel I cannot pronounce his name, Paradiogos or something like that. But he was causing troubles elsewhere, and the brothers were like focused on fighting each other for like the claim to the Sultanate after their dad's death or something. And then Salim killed Ahmed, and even that was portrayed accurately. And yeah, it's kind of those like little details that you see. It's what makes a game kind of real life.
I'm not too familiar with that whole era of history, I'm afraid, but it sounds like we got quite the expert in you. That's just awesome to hear. Proves the attention.
You should check out the Discovery Tour.
Oh yeah, for sure. We
did a Discovery Tour about Turkey. Like it was a live stream, and we were raising money for Turkey and Syria. But what we did is kind of like do a live Discovery Tour of both Turkey and Syria. And we went over a lot of topics, and the accuracies and stuff like that. So like, if your viewers are like interested, they can learn more about history over there.
Absolutely. Make sure to have a link for everything in the description.
Oh, definitely.
Speaking of Ezio and that stuff, I thought we could cover, that era for a bit, like, the Renaissance, the late 15th century, because that's the thing about, especially AC2 and Brotherhood, is, the inspiration from real life history is off the charts. Like certain events or characters or whatever. Like even the slightest person you think, oh, they made that character up for the game. No. This person existed in real life. It's so crazy.
Yeah.
But I actually
even Bartolomeo Daviano.
That's right. He was supposedly a real warrior of sorts, like mercenary. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Very big.
It's what I'm almost surprised by is just like almost how all these characters made it into history books. Like, so wild.
Yeah, I mean, most of them had the money to make it into the.
Of course, yeah. A lot of them were quite wealthy and or were in league with like the Papal State or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, anywhere from the Medicis to.
Of course, they were like more or less the rulers of Florence.
Yeah, the Pazzi's are really in there just because, I mean, you need a villain. To the story of the Medicis. Like, the Medicis were like, okay, let's make the Pazzi's, like, really evil.
Yeah. I actually did a bit of, earlier today when we record this, I did a bit of reading on, the whole AC versus real life history, and apparently that whole, Renaissance era is like one of the eras that ultimately they have tampered with the most. Not in terms of like, events that took place or characters that existed, but more, writing their own version of these characters or these events, if that makes sense.
Right.
Like, apparently Katerina Sforza, who, what is it, she's like the Duchess of Forli, or what is it? I forget her title.
Yeah, the Duchess of Forli.
Yeah, like in the game, she's portrayed as this very, kind woman who Ezio uses his charm on. You know what I mean? But apparently, in real life, she was, like, quite a cruel person. Like, quite a cruel ruler.
I mean, she had to be. I mean,
of course.
She was stuck in a man's world. I mean, talk about a woman that made a name for herself.
Getting married at like 14, or did I read that somewhere? Ago. I think I did.
Yeah, she got married way too young.
Of course, I mean, everybody did back then.
Back in the day,
nobody gave.
Back in the day, that's how they rolled. So like they had their own time back then. But I mean, that was Italy. Like, okay, who do we connect our son or daughter to have, like, better status in the world, or like, to give her dowry to the son-in-law or something like that, like, so we can have like some political influence. But a book that I really recommend for you to read about Caterina Sforza is The Tigress of Forli.
I can't say I've heard of that. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
kind of like
the Tigress.
Kind of like a biography of sorts about her.
Basically, yeah, it's like a biography of her life. And when I took the Renaissance class, that was like a required reading.
Oh yeah, no, that's real interesting.
I'm like a book about Caterina Sforza. Let me read it up, please.
Yeah, no, that's quite cool. And speaking of, like powerful families, I think we should, cover the Borgia family as well, who are, like the pillar of evil in both AC2 and especially Brotherhood. I suppose the main trio, they were real life characters: Rodrigo, Cesare, and Lucrezia. But apparently, a lot of the their evil status was ultimately not saying that they were power mongers and maybe were a little off here and there, but apparently like the picture of them like being really evil was slanderous rumors ultimately that, you know, somehow make their way up through Italy and like the Papal States or whatever it was called then.
Basically, yeah. I mean, in their own way, Cesare and Rodrigo were kind of like, you know, the father was a schemer, so the son was a schemer too. The daughter gets painted in this like kind of like evil way, but like, you know, she was again a woman in a man's world.
She was,
and I mean, she got married to a guy and then escaped, and then that guy died. She had like a pretty tragic life, but like what I've read about like Lucrezia's life is she was the good apple.
I suppose so. I mean, from what I know, from what I read earlier, the games made up Cesare and Lucrezia's incestuous relationship, from what we know. Yeah. And I will agree with you. Like Lucrezia, just in the game itself, she is kind of like that, I suppose, ultimately misfit in the family. Like, she's not purely evil of heart like Rodrigo and Cesare, yet she kind of, because she's forced to, maybe, she kind of gives into their world and kind of serves as, you know, the trophy daughter, the trophy sister, wife, girlfriend, whatever you want to call it. And that becomes quite clear towards the end of the game when, you know, Cesare starts beating her and she breaks down and everything, and Ezio, you know, comforts her.
Cesare himself viewed himself very highly.
He did indeed. The whole, like, no man can kill me thing, where Ezio in the most badass way just, alright, fine, I'll throw her off the cliff, let's see if you survive that then. No, you didn't. That's right, bitch.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting because, like, I mean, you kind of view Cesare has this, like, Jesus-like figure.
Does indeed. Like, maybe the looks a little as well.
Huh?
Maybe the kind of Jesus look a little too, like the long hair and the everything.
Yeah. The long hair and the everything, and like there's this one portrait of him that, if you don't know it's Cesare Borgia, you look at it and be like, oh, that's like Jesus or something like that, brought into like an Italian fashion. Because, I mean, Cesare is kind of like, I'm really glad they chose Cesare to be like the villain of Brotherhood, because like you know he's more able to be the villain of Brotherhood. Rodrigo would just be like, ooh, I'm the Pope. I order your death.
Yeah, Cesare is kind of like a wannabe in a way. Like if it's daddy issues or whatever, trying to prove himself. Like that's the thing about Cesare. Like I definitely enjoyed his character, and he definitely made for a good villain. But I remember reading at one point, like, people called him Ezio's, like, number one nemesis, and I would hardly disagree there. That's Rodrigo for sure. Like, yes, Ezio, you know, his goal is to stop Cesare and everything, but, like, on a personal level, you know, Cesare never wronged Ezio the same way Rodrigo did.
I mean, he did take away his uncle, but his dad took away Ezio's whole family, so, like,
yeah.
Well, Ezio's whole patriarch of families, like future patriarchs, were no longer patriarchs. Ezio was the only one, the male side of the family that survived that tragedy, and like, you know,
indeed,
it's kind of like he took a lot of the futures of his family from him. So yeah, I'd argue if there's like a like a nemesis system for Ezio, it would be like Rodrigo, Borgia, Rodrigo, Cesare, and then Ahmed.
Yeah, of course.
Because Ahmed took Yusuf away from him, so
of course. But I've always just thought in terms of like who. Like who does something to Ezio that defines him the absolute most, and, you know, makes him 20 years younger in like a split second, and that's 100% Rodrigo. you know, when he executes his family and all that.
Yeah, yeah, it's I think the Renaissance is this like period where there's like a lot of change happening, while there's also political turmoil to the max. Basically,
it's an interesting it is indeed such an interesting period, and what was that, like AC2 and Brotherhood like portrayed so brilliantly, just the mystery and the dark sides of it and all that does it so brilliantly.
I do have to say, one accuracy that I really like about the Renaissance, especially about Assassin's Creed 2, is that whenever you go and you want to kill Rodrigo for the first time, you go into the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel is not there yet because Michelangelo has not done the work yet.
Isn't it the Sistine Chapel was there, but his paintings weren't there yet. They weren't there until like 10-15 years later or something.
Well, yeah, like Michelangelo's like magnum opus, basically. It was not there until like he later took like the project and like did it. But yeah, like you kind of see the Sistine Chapel without something we're used to right now. Like that is like one of the best ceilings ever.
It is indeed
created by human hands, and it's not there. Although it's not there, I felt kind of good, because if it was there, then they would have had to like draw that whole thing with like PS3 graphics.
Yeah. I can see the point in that. Speaking of the Sistine Chapel, you know, that makes me think of St. Peter's Basilica, of course. I can't remember the specific years, but they're in the, you know, the early 16th century. What was it? Like, you know, the old church, which had been there for so and so long, was being deconstructed and replaced with, you know, the ginormous church we know today.
St. Peter's Basilica?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also like
this
why in both.
This was in Rome, right?
In Rome, yeah. And that's why in Brotherhood, you know, we see the scaffolding and everything like there at St. Peter's Basilica.
There's also, I mean, that's like pretty cool, but like just to fast forward a bit, in historical time, bring it back a little bit. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, there's this church in London that's like all like fired up, like kind of like burning, but like there's like ashes over there, and it's basically St. Peter's. I think London has St. Peter's, right?
No, that's St. Paul's.
Oh, St. Paul.
St. Paul's Cathedral, and then St. Peter's in Rome.
Oh, okay. So St. Paul's Cathedral in like London was burnt, and it's like historical accuracy, because like back then it was burnt and you see it burnt, and it's like, what? Like, this is so cool. And then they had to like reconstruct it, but like wherever St. Paul's Cathedral is right now, it's also like in game, which is, yeah, it's mental. Like, man, I just get really like goosebumps.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. It's basically
like programming work that they're doing, but like just the attention to detail that they give the games is so cool.
Of course.
But
I think we can we will just return to the Renaissance then, kind of wrap that up before we move up in time, I suppose, towards the more like modern times. But I was just thinking, if there's anything we've missed from like the Renaissance there, I don't think so. You know, like I said, a lot of the characters and stuff, whether that is Assassin Allies or Templars, and a lot of the events and such, like, by default, that is inspired by real-life history, but, some characters, their personality, and maybe even age and such has kind of been tampered with a bit to, fit into Ezio's story, which, ultimately we can't blame them for. Still, I suppose, just the fact that Ubisoft know all these, I suppose, in the big picture, minor historical characters exist, that's pretty cool, and that they're all implemented in.
Yeah, it's, you get to see a character like Leonardo da Vinci, for example, right?
Who's one of the coolest people ever. Yeah.
Yeah. When we think of Leo, historically we just see that painting of his with, like, his big beard, basically.
Yeah. But we kind of see the young version of him here.
Huh?
But we kind of see the younger Leonardo da Vinci in AC.
Yeah, and you get to see that, and not only that, but, like, you get to see a version of, like, a version of Leonardo that can be friends with Ezio, like.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you don't get to see, like, this old bearded guy and, like, he's thinking about how to fly planes into the sky, basically, like.
Yeah,
but
no, it
but
makes
you
sense.
can see him in his, like, prime thinking about those stuff, which is more relatable.
Makes sense.
So taking some sort of liberty like that sometimes is okay, as long as it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. So, like, that's, like, my whole take on that.
Yeah. No, yeah. As I said, it did a lot of things, like, brilliantly in its own way. Ultimately, just inspired by real life history. Yeah. All right,
Exactly.
we can always come back to the Renaissance there, but like I said, I think we should move up in history a bit, like towards the 18th century, and, like, where some of the other games are set, because the 18th century is also one, where there's been a lot of settings and a lot of characters. We have Black Flag early on in the Golden Age of piracy, and of course we also have the American Revolution in, the latter half of that century, which I suppose is more historically accurate, both in terms of its events and its characters and just the overall feel of it. And that is probably because that is, it is more recent, and the history books are more fresh, and there are more records and all that stuff, as opposed to stuff that took place almost 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. They have more primary sources.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That we can learn from. To start this off, I didn't want to start it in the American Revolution. I wanted to start with, like, the grandpa of Edward Kenway.
Yeah.
The grandpa of Connor Kenway.
Yeah. Edward's the Golden Age of piracy there.
Yeah. So like the Age of Pirates. There's a lot of primary sources about, like, pirates. They're all kind of wishy-washy kind of thing. Like, you don't know if you can trust it or not, but there's this one big book about the pirates. It's called The General History of the Pirates with a Y. And it talks about, like, Steve Bonnet. It talks about Mary Read and Bonnie.
All of
Basically,
Edward's friends, really.
Yeah, all of Edward's friends, and Darby used that book as a major influence on AC4 Black Flag.
Yeah.
And you have, like, the accurate death of Blackbeard happening right in front of your eyes after making this friendship with him. You get to see him die in front of you, and that was just
such a wild moment in the game as well. That's kind of the first time where you're, like, shocked, I suppose. That's kind of like the first time in Black Flag's story where you're like, in shock. Like, what just happened? Like, this whole grand plan of finding the observatory and becoming rich may not be anything.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens with that is like you kind of get to see if you are not a historian, you kind of get to see Blackbeard die in front of you without you knowing that Blackbeard actually dies in this battle.
Yeah. Now that's the thing with Black Flag. There are a lot of like Edward's friends and even some of the the villains. They were real live characters, and also some of the different events, like among others the Siege of Nassau, which from what I remember that was actually on my birthday in 1718. Good 300 years before I was born, but sure.
The Siege of Nassau?
Yeah, like when the British came there and said like either you join us, get a pardon, or we hang you.
Yeah, basically. I think that was one iconic moment, the King's Pardon, in there, and learning about Woodes Rogers in that game was so cool because like I did not read the general history of the pirates until I played AC4 Black Flag, but then you kind of get to see Woodes Rogers is in that book, and like he's just like he's like really successful in like kind of getting these pirates to like bend and be like
most
like
definitely
getting the pardons basically.
Most definitely.
One of my favorite things is actually when Ben Hornigold turncoats and goes against the pirates. That's historically accurate too.
That's kind of in-game, like a pretty wild thing. Hornigold, who, early on in the story is like one of your primary mentors, like teaching you how to be like a captain and plunder ships, and then the way like he just turns and that's like the first, Edward doesn't enjoy making that kill.
Yeah, exactly. That kill to Edward and the player was really hard to do. It's just like, I don't want to kill you, but like, in order to go and continue on, I have to. And
it's kind of messed up.
I mean, speaking of accuracy, he did die in the jungle like that. Like,
I wouldn't know about that, but that's pretty neat if it is. Yeah, it's like on the ship crashes on the island of Centenias, I think it is, and you do a little bit of climbing and you stab him. That is quite interesting, and because like you say, the golden age of piracy is still like a relatively fresh part of history. It's give or take 300 years ago, and everything. But I feel like we should just as I said, return to the American Revolution there about 70 years later. That is definitely, I think, other than like in terms of the games that have really like taken inspiration from real life history, that is definitely, like I said, probably the most accurate and the one that's the freshest in the history book still.
Yeah, I mean, the realism that they put into that game was so
most definitely, from all the different battles across the what at the time was called like the 13 colonies and everything, the Boston Tea Party, the Battle of why am I forgetting? Concord and Lexington. There was something Vermouth, I can't remember. Not Vermouth, probably. I'm forgetting the name. But Concord and Lexington, among others. Connor apparently being the saving grace in all those. The reasons why the main reason why the U.S. Army won.
Yeah, Ratonhageddon being Connor.
Yeah.
That's his real name.
His cooler real name. Yeah.
Ratonhageddon being in this war, especially Ubisoft taking the Native American approach into it. You get to see like an impartial side of the war, and you get to see what Washington does to Connor's tribe, and then it like freaking ticks to you. It's like when I researched what like Washington did to like the Native Americans, um, he did it in like retaliation, but like he could have gone softer with them. Um, it, later in his life, Washington would be like very like I think like seeking peace and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
he didn't want to do a lot of the politics, which is why we have the
Kind of like the
a
general,
president
the more soldier
served 4 years.
portrayed in AC3 or what?
Yeah, but like
Yeah, I
like
suppose.
one of the historical accuracies in there that is very like hidden in game. I don't think they bring so much attention into this is when Hatham like gets that letter that is sent to Washington by like General Sullivan or something like that, and it's sent to him accurately, like like that, and yeah, that moment is kind of like a trend table
It is.
of like.
I suppose it is. I mean, that's the thing about Washington. He is portrayed in AC3 as kind of like not a villain, but also like not your friend, more just an associate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
the way
basically.
that he, did what he did to Connor's tribe and village and all that, both like early on and when Connor is an adult. But then again, Connor knows they're fighting ultimately for the same thing, a liberated United States. And by the end of the game, and also as that goes into Tyranny of King Washington and such, they are they respect each other.
They respect each other. Though I mean, Connor would be a bit bitter about it. But yeah, like even like the revolution of like the American Revolution in itself was pretty bloody, and
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was like pretty bloody. I think I've been listening to this podcast called History That Doesn't Suck. Like it's a good title.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, damn it. And the author like tells it as like these people were just like normal people that like took up their arms and like they're like, okay, let's do this thing, like let's. Of course it didn't happen like all of a sudden. It was like a lot of events that happened that ultimately led to the American Revolution.
Of course.
Happening. Yeah, but like Assassin's Creed, what it does is like it takes its time to like get to like the final battle, or something like that. Charles Lee being like your number one nemesis in there is also like, oh, who is Charles Lee? Like I didn't know Charles Lee was actually a freaking historical figure.
Of course he is.
Before Assassin's Creed. Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing about Assassin's Creed in general. Like, in a lot of ways, with a lot of things, playing those games has served as the awesome history lessons that I never had in school.
Yeah, I wish like in like 10 years or something like that, when these games are being remade again,
Maybe, yeah.
with lifelike graphics.
That they can serve as like.
I wish they do a discovery tour of them.
I was actually just I wanted to touch upon the discovery tour real quick. That was introduced in Origins back in the day, and then like it came again throughout the RPG trilogy, I suppose, and I actually remember seeing like or reading about high school teachers actually praising that for like serving really well as it's a way you can have fun while playing the game, but at the same time learn about real life history through that by doing the discovery tours. and there were even like some teachers who actually used that as part of their teaching.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Discovery Tour is being used in a lot of classrooms. Hopefully, more classrooms. Like,
Yeah.
I think
That's fun. That's fun homework. For tomorrow, you need to go home and play this. Oh, nice! I don't have to read or anything.
I know, right?
I'll have fun playing video games.
Kind of what I wanted to do in the past was like be a history teacher and like literally tell people, hey, go play Discovery Tour and like bring me like a paper about it.
That's so
like,
cool.
Write me a paper about it. But what is so cool right now is, I mean, Discovery Tour even went into 10 Downing Street, which is basically the government of
it's where the
UK.
English Prime Minister lives.
Yeah, exactly. So like the English Prime Minister was literally looking at the Discovery Tour and like how it's being used for like educational purposes. And yeah, I mean, when Ubisoft is in a room that is with the Prime Minister and they're playing this video game that teaches people about their own history, about like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, because I mean Valhalla is it's in England, so it just made sense
to have
to have it there.
For sure. And it's definitely just in terms of actually, I suppose, more formally teaching history and, the more real-life counterparts. The whole Discovery Tour thing really is quite innovative. And it's such a creative and, innovative learning endeavor.
It's upping its game with like every release. I really hope AC Mirage has a Discovery Tour.
Most definitely has.
Baghdad.
I don't see why it shouldn't about the whole Middle East, because that's something I'd love to know more about in specifics. That's what is so wild about. I think I may have mentioned it on the previous episode. But that's what's so wild about, the Middle East is that, back then, over 1,000 years ago, they were so advanced in everything, medicine, architecture, everything, and look where the Middle East is today. It's quite a digression, but it's pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah, they could bounce back. Saudi Arabia is for sure like one of the richest countries out there, but like with like how Baghdad is right now and how it used to be,
it's messed up.
It's like a very stark difference, and we're gonna play in that Baghdad soon, and I hope like people are more aware of like Baghdad's rich history, and like they get to research about it and like learn from us, the community creators that like create content, to kind of like go visit if it's safe.
Of course, yeah. I mean, there's certainly a lot of options, and I'm sure we could probably talk about all this, like comparing for hours and hours, and we can always come back to it. But of course, I also wanted to cover a little bit, future historical settings for AC. What options there are. We spoke about this like a bit years ago, but that is a while ago now. And of course, here's some fresh takes on it.
Yeah, I mean, I have two historical settings I really want in there. I think the first of it being World War II.
Yeah, that could
not
work.
Not even World War One. I just want World War II.
We had a little bit of it in Unity, I suppose, with the rifts, like scaling the Eiffel Tower and shooting down planes with massive machine guns and whatnot.
Yeah, but like World War II is more like, it's crazy, man. Like I get that it's way too modern and like guns will be like used a lot in there, but like having a blade in World War II and just like the game has to be super stealthy, like
And that could work now that you say it. Like you could have, I don't know if like weapon silencers existed at the time. Did they? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
But like hypothetically, you could have that and a mix of like a blade and do it like stealth in Far Cry, for example, where you're actually quite reliant in like takedowns with your knife and whatnot, just as much as you are like guns blazing.
Thinking about Far Cry,
yeah,
Far Cry in World War II would also make sense.
Oh, that could actually be quite cool. Now that you say it, let's say that for another episode or something.
I know, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now World War II, I suppose it could work also with like history as we know it in AC and all the stuff that went on there. With all the like the truth in AC2, for example, all the documents about Abstergo really orchestrating the whole thing or what it was, and Henry Ford being a Templar and whatever else was going on.
So I have I'm gonna get back to your topic, but
yeah, sure.
I do have over here that it says silencers were regularly used by agents of the United States of Strategic Services who favored the newly designed high standard HDM.
Okay, so they did exist in a way, but less mobile than yeah, they did. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I would say for me, and we talked a little bit about that pre-recording, but medieval France, that would be really cool to see. And I think I have talked about this on a previous episode. That could ultimately serve as kind of like a Unity prequel, if that makes sense. Like 300-400 whatever years before Unity, but kind of set up like France as we know it, and like focus on the aftermath of, as we talked about in the beginning of the episode, like the aftermath of the Templars supposedly being wiped out.
I see what you mean there. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I don't know much about medieval France. Like, I mean, we're talking here like 1400s, 1300s.
Yeah, 1300s.
But I mean, Assassin's Creed did visit France a little bit more in AC Valhalla, Siege of Paris.
Oh yeah.
But
of course.
I mean, in Siege of Paris, I mean, you don't really have a lot of landmarks that like exist in Paris.
Makes perfect sense.
I mean, the Eiffel Tower was certainly not there.
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's just from what I know about like European history, like during that time, France, they were pretty much like, yeah, England was becoming something at the time, but I feel like all the focus is on France, like landmark wise, advancement wise, monarchy wise, all that stuff. It was all in France and Paris, and as you said there in the early 1400s, you had a character like Joan of Arc.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Joan of Arc has always been in the AC lore of things.
Yeah, of course. I remember she was in one of the truth documents as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I wonder what AC Hexe is gonna be in. But like, I mean, it says probably like medieval Germany or something like that.
Maybe we'll have to see. We covered that a little in the previous episode. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd say. Oh, sorry.
There's also like civil war that they can go into.
There's so much potential for sure. I mean,
yeah, the Civil War is like the first time where like guns were like used like really I think on like a Jurassic basis, but like it still warrants the use of like swords basically swords and
Right.
other things. It's kind of like this transitional period between the old world and the new world.
For sure. When was this?
Well, the old world and the modern world. Sorry.
Yeah. When was this?
Yeah.
You said?
The Civil War. American Civil War.
Oh, the American Civil War. Oh, yeah, I know about that for sure. I must have missed you saying American. No, that's actually interesting you say that. I have thought about that too, actually. Once, like a game set in the American Civil War could actually be quite interesting.
And it could serve as a good point where we see John Wilkes Booth, like him being like a Templar, probably turned out. I don't know what John Wilkes Booth in AC lore is. I don't know if you know.
The name rings a bell, but I can't quite place him. But I feel like I know who it is. Little bit of reading.
He's the guy that killed Lincoln.
Oh yeah, Lincoln, of course. That was his name. That's right. Yeah, there's definitely potential there for him, like being a Templar of sorts, and the Confederacy in reality being like a Templar, another Templar scheme. There's certainly potential there for sure. I would say in terms of other like potential eras for me, I would say I said that on the last episode of Rally the Creed, but we've never had a game set in the 17th century, the 1600s, and there's so much potential there all over the world. It was there when naval expeditions and such, naval trading and such was really evolving. The British, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Portuguese. It was there the West Indies was being colonized by all of those people. So there's definitely so much potential. Also, like my own home country, Denmark, we were doing a lot of stuff there. Like some of the kings and such in that time, they were developing like Copenhagen like crazy, and we were also a bit of like a naval nation and such. There's so much potential for that century for sure. I've also thought about like the 1600s, whether that is like probably the latter half of them, if it ultimately was, like when the golden age of piracy was beginning, and just naval like sailing and trading was really taking off.
Yeah, there's also like the War of the Roses, that Game of Thrones is like inspired by, but like, what if Assassin's Creed gets in there and like kind of like has their own politics going over there? But like, I don't know. That's like one of those projects that's in Assassin's Creed Infinity that you get to play as kind of like a Lydia Fry game from like AC Syndicate, where you went to like World War I. But like I don't know.
For sure.
It could be interesting.
I've also thought that like a potential setting, actually kind of, I suppose, sticking in like the more ancient realm that we're kind of in now, with Origins, Mirage, all that stuff. I've actually thought about the idea of a game set in ancient Rome. Like, ideally one that ends right where, or one that begins right where Origins ends, if that makes sense. With Brutus and, Caesar being impaled and all that. And in a lot of ways, that could probably serve as like almost like a prequel for Brotherhood.
Listen, we've been asking for an Amunet game for like a while now.
Yeah.
And
but it makes perfect sense.
Ubisoft's problems when they happened about like all the sexual stuff.
Yeah.
The sexual assault stuff that happened. That was like right now, like 3 years ago or something.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sounds about right. Time has passed, and there's AC Mirage happening, and there is AC Red happening, which will have like I think I'm not. I'm just speculating over here, but it's rumored that it's gonna have like a female character and a male character, and then the AC Hexay will also probably be a female lead, which is a first for like Assassin's Creed. But after Hexay, I say that's enough time to build a game around Amunet and introduce the next gen of games as Ancient Rome, you know?
For sure. I mean, I think I've said this on a previous episode, but kind of, you know, a game possibly playing as Brutus maybe, or just following him closely is ideal. It's like the ideal opportunity, and it would be so cool to see him, you know, rock the armor of Brutus that, you know, you can acquire as Ezio, and you could also dive into, you know, that sounds about right, like, you know, the whole, what is it they were called, like the Romulus cult. You remember those guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like the guys who dressed as wolves and all that stuff.
Remind me. I mean, Romulus. Is it Romulus Brutus or?
Oh no! The real life thing, like I can't quite remember when in history it was, but you know the legend is that Rome was like founded by Romulus and Remus, whose mother was like a wolf, and they were like baby wolves, or I can't quite. It's been a while since I since I heard that story, but and then Romulus's disciples, or what they were called in Brotherhood, there was just that cult, and you know there were the Romulus lairs, which were a lot of fun.
What I'm talking about is you mean Brutus from like AC Origins Brutus?
Yeah, that guy. I mean, I take that him and then the armor we find in Brotherhood, you know, belong to the same guy.
So I would say if they were gonna do something like this, and they're probably gonna have like one chance to go to Ancient Rome, I would say that they really have to make it an Amunet centered game, with this time Brutus having basically the AC Origins Aya treatment.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I see what you mean.
Where he gets to play in like a mini game, in like a short section of the game, and we still get to control Brutus, but
wearing the armor of Brutus and everything. That could be.
We mainly control Amunet.
That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. And the thing with a map like that, hypothetically, like of course there would be some things that don't exist yet, but by default, like, you know, Rome wouldn't necessarily look too different from the one we see in Brotherhood.
Yeah, I mean,
like the Colosseum wasn't built yet, and Castel San Angelo and whatever wasn't, you know, didn't exist until like another 500 years or such. But just I feel like the overall tone and such of that map would be quite similar to what we know from Brotherhood.
You'll get some stuff from it, but like I mean, Ubisoft can probably just like recycle the map, but like delete the Colosseum from there.
All that stuff, yeah. There's definitely potential in that game.
I think the Pantheon was made by the Pantheon. How it is right now wouldn't be over there, but like the first Pantheon was built by Augustus's best friend. I think his name is Agrippa, Marcus Agrippa. Like literally, the Pantheon has his name written because when like Hadrian rebuilt the Pantheon, he dedicated it to like Agrippa. Yeah.
A bit of reading for me there.
Yeah.
That sounds
Marcus Agrippa.
That's real interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Pantheon picture right now.
That's cool.
But yeah, like it would be at its very like early stages. I don't know, like an ancient Rome game, man.
We need it.
It would be so cool.
Some point. We need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, though.
He just inspired me to like go make like a what if segment in like AC Landmarks probably, and like say like, oh, what if we go to ancient Rome in Assassin's Creed? Probably.
It would be so cool. I mean, that and then like the
anyway.
medieval France thing I mentioned. I feel like there are, for a lot of the games, there are possibilities that we could be in the same location, but so and so long before that, and have that kind of serve as a prequel to the game we already know set in that location.
Yeah.
It's kind of maybe already happened a bit with like, I always say that kind of like Rogue is kind of like the prequel to AC3 in a lot of ways. You know, it basically sets up that game, you know, why the assassins have lost control of the colonies, and like it sets up Hatham, it sets up, you know, some of the things that would eventually ignite the Revolutionary War and all that. Alright though, I feel like we could, it's almost like we should have split this into 2 episodes, but I feel like we could go on, and we've covered a lot of great things, and honestly we can make a part 2 of this at some point if you want to, but other than that, I feel like we've covered everything there is for now, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. We will most likely make a part 2 out of this when
we probably could. Maybe
comes out or something like that.
We'll have to see. Yeah.
The community is going to be very, very busy with like that, but yeah, it was really amazing to talk to you about all the history stuff.
Absolutely,
that Assassin's Creed has, man.
I enjoyed it. It's you can definitely say Assassin's Creed. I've always been like intrigued by history, but Assassin's Creed definitely like took it to another level, and you know, has just taught me so much history. Whether that is like, you know, like minor historical events and characters, or major ones. For example, the American Revolution, among other things.
And more than that, I think like it's not only the history part. I mean, the history part is what, like, you know, it connects all the community together, and like also the lore. But like Assassin's Creed has created this community of like good people who like want to help around the world, and I mean us doing you guys were a part of it. The ones who came before were a part of Assassin's Creed community relief. But yeah, like, who thought a game about history can like make
unite us like that and everything,
can raise money to like tend to humanity, you know, like that's what like history does, like history and like video games too, like because of our love for like history and like Assassin's Creed lore, we all banded together to like help around people who were in need, and yeah, hopefully
brings people together. Yeah, for sure.
Huh?
It brings people together. Yeah.
It brings people together. In short, yeah, it just like, man, it's really cool that the effect that Assassin's Creed has on the world, basically. It's Ubisoft's. I would say it's Ubisoft's #1 franchise. I'm not gonna lie.
Definitely is.
Yeah, it's Ubisoft's #1 franchise, and it's just gonna get stronger and stronger as it goes, because I think we have so many years of history to cover, and so many significant events. So
like the early games said, history is our playground. Yeah,
exactly.
But
yeah.
But with that said, I feel like we should wrap this. Wouldn't you say?
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I want, of course, to thank you all for listening to this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. Stay up to date on everything happening here on the site and more things AC. Links to all social medias from everyone can be found down below. And once again, thanks for listening, everyone. We hope to see you all for the next episodes. And until those come out, stay safe and keep the community what it is. And of course, thanks to my guests for joining me. It was so much fun. We have to do as I said, we have to do a part 2 of this at some point.
Let's do it.
Because I feel like we only scratched the surface with comparing history to the games and all that stuff. But with that said, that sums it up for this episode. Stay safe and active, everyone. See you later, Assassins. Peace.